Alright everybody, and here we go. Welcome back to Stacks by the Numbers, and happy Turkey Day, happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Had a short day today. Figured I'd do a quick update here on FUBO. We'll close out the month here. Maybe I'll do another update on SMCI, right? A couple of our favorites for the last month or two. But FUBO here, as we see this, I just drew out this trend line here. Let me change the color for you there. We'll make it orange. And I extended this top trend line here, going from this initial pop back in mid-August, if you recall. And then that was coming down right there to the top of the body on that candle. And we can see that this was the support level that we spoke about initially. And when we had the break here, I mentioned that we could come down to this support trend line here. You might see 126, 127. But as you see, we had a fib level right here about 139. And you can see that's basically where the stock went to after breaking support and then tried to reclaim that trend line. Ended up rejecting, coming right back down to that fib again just about 10 days ago. And then we've kind of been chunking back up. And you can see that right here at the trend line, about 163 is exactly the high that the stock hit today. And then we pulled back a couple of cents. So in my opinion, we have this big drop and now this W recovery potentially coming. So I feel that probably over the next day or two, FUBO can, even if it goes up slightly, right here to this fib, 164, that'll technically be back above support, right? And that the initial pattern that we saw was this kind of symmetrical triangle after going from the lows there August 12th to the pop of the initial ruling that went in their favor on the 19th. So it looks like a big triangle, and obviously, technically, we could break either up or down, and it's kind of hard to call because, again, you guys know overall how I feel about FUBO. Again, this is a sports streaming service. They've been seeing increasing revenue. The margins are getting better. They're getting closer and closer to profitability. Subscriber count was basically consistently growing. We know last quarter they came in with a very slight miss on revenue. That's technically like the first bit of negative news we've gotten on FUBO since we started covering them like a year and a half, 2 years ago. So in my opinion, I really wouldn't read into that too much. That's just me personally. Full disclosure, I do have a very tiny position in FUBO. Again, if the stock pops to $5 tomorrow, it's definitely nothing worth writing home about. I promise you that much. But you guys know I'm always transparent with you. But again, technically on the technical side, could break either up or down. Overall, in my opinion, I think it should break up, being that everything is up lately. But, I mean, technically, I guess it could break down also, because I personally didn't think it would break the support level. But again, if they're, kind of viewing it as slightly negative because they technically did miss, I mean, I guess they could break it down. But realistically, in my opinion, they should bring it back up here in the triangle. It should break up. And I'd say, it might be short-lived. Because if we look here, this is our top trend line here. This is going back from August. What is that? It's right in there. I can't get it. August 16, 22 to that last spike up there, like December 13, 14, I think, 23. And that's just cutting down across, right? So that's now our long-term resistance trend line. So if we do happen to, let's just say, what is this? Friday. Okay, so this is like 1 week from today. So let's say we pop up, stay in the triangle, approach the apex, and then pop up, right? You can see you're looking at about 219, maybe right around that level, maybe 220 even. But when we initially got the news, the stock spiked up to 218. So if it wants, also, this is why I'm saying it could be very short-lived, because if it pops up, it can potentially double top at 218, which would also meet up with the long-term resistance trend line at around 218, and then you can get the drop back down. So, unfortunately, in my opinion, even if it does pop up, it may be short-lived and pull back. I mean, this is a situation where, in my opinion, the fundamentals have been growing and moving in the right direction. The problem is, again, this company's currently dealing with a lawsuit. And that's the issue, because I remind everyone that before we got news of the joint venture with Disney and Fox, who else? Warner Brothers, whoever it was. But before we got news of that, the stock hit almost $4 on two times off of its own merits. Before we got news of the joint venture and the lawsuit. See, and now the problem is everyone just kind of forgot about that, and now everyone's waiting on the lawsuit. So unfortunately, it's kind of positioned itself into more of a quote unquote gamble in my eyes just because of this litigation. And it's unfortunate because the company seemed like they were on the up and up before all of this started to happen. So that's why, again, overall, in my opinion, really should break up. But again, I mean, markets continue to keep climbing. And basically everything you look at is holding steady or continuing to break up and out. Even the smaller caps that people are talking about that are trending on Reddit, even if you look at a lot of the quantum computing stocks that recently had a pop, they're just continuing to go. So if everything's, that's what I mean, if everything's just continuing to break up and out and 70-80% of the situations you look at are turn out to be more bullish than bearish, then yeah, to say that we can pop up and out to 220 and change and maybe even finally get above that level going into the new year, it could happen. It could happen. I felt that the January effect would benefit somebody like FUBO because again, they've kind of been beaten up. They're being held flat, and I know that it's a little unforeseen because we have the result of the lawsuit, I believe October of now this year coming up, October 2025. So we're still going to have a decent amount of time before we get the answer, but you know, we have this mini symmetrical triangle inside of this larger symmetrical triangle. So again, that's why short-lived, it could bounce around in between these earnings. And then as we approach October, let's see, let me extend these trend lines out of curiosity. Bear with me. So we extend the top, we extend the bottom, and look at that. We are in this big long-term multi-year symmetrical triangle. And we were saying what? October 2025. And look, right around the apex, you can see October of 2025. So this is why, unfortunately, we might not see much action in FUBO. However, again, as I said, based on the fact that before this quarter, we started to get revenue up, and then we turned around the EPS, and all of a sudden we were beating on both the top and bottom line. We jump up into the 300 million milestone. We're consistently beating. Bang, we jump up into the 400 million. We're maintaining. We're consistently beating. And then boom, we have a very slight miss. But of course, EPS significantly more narrow of a loss than Wall Street was expecting, beating by over 10%. So that's why I think they got the losses in check. And if we look at a lot of recent news, they're, you know, collabing with a bunch of other people. You have other companies like Roku tapping into FUBO. And we looked at the one article again that broke down like the efficiency, the interaction rate of the ads on FUBO compared to other platforms. And FUBO was significantly better than a lot of its competitors. So that's why I was saying, in my opinion, you were slowly going to hear news of probably more people tapping FUBO, more people signing deals with FUBO, and that's why over time I think it should be on the up and up. Also, the fact that the initial ruling went in FUBO's favor, and now we're waiting for the appeal out in October. Again, I know it might suck, and you might not see a lot of action for 10, 12 months. However, if it was initially gone in the favor of FUBO and not much has changed, we might just get the similar initial reaction, right? To where it's like, yeah, not much, you know, new information has come to light. We're looking, you know, we looked over the whole situation. Initially, they were against it. So, you know what? I'm just going to rule in favor of FUBO again, right? We could potentially have a play out like that. So we could remain quiet. And then if we do get good news, we're going to pop. And we might go right back up to $3.50, potentially $4 and hit new highs, in my opinion. Because supposedly the worst would be over, right? But again, I know in theory it seems like kind of a toss-up, and it might be a situation where you gotta wait till October. But in my opinion, it could be viewed as an opportunity. If the stock might just run up to the low twos, and then come back to 130, 140, and then, you know, run up to 170. So this could be viewed as an opportunity. So if you like the company, if you like the service they provide, if you kind of feel confident that the revenue is going to keep growing, the subscriber count's going to keep growing, more people are going to, again, do deals with FUBO and tap them, then you technically, I guess, could view this as an opportunity over the next 9-10 months to just keep adding, building a position, and hopefully waiting for that big breakout. But we looked at this stock about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Excuse me. Market cap here, touch over $500 million. Company brought in, again, over 370 million just last quarter. EPS has been on the up and up. We're still expecting a loss next quarter, but again, I said over the next couple of quarters, as we get close to potential flatness or profitability, that may really kickstart the value of FUBO as well. And again, we look at the growth here in revenue, 200 mil, 600 million, a billion, almost 1.4 billion. So we're growing very nicely in the revenue. We're growing our margins. We're growing our subscriber count. So that's why everything, for the most part, seems like it's on the up and up for FUBO, which is why I said again, even if it breaks down here to the 127 mark, probably going to be short-lived, it'll hang out. So it's just an unfortunate situation because it really was doing well before we got news of this joint venture. And again, 3 media conglomerates teaming up to take on FUBO and enter their space. Just keep that in mind. We had some insider selling just the other day. COO sold 47,000 shares at $1.47, 70 grand. Covered taxes. Yeah, that doesn't seem like an issue. Still directly owns almost 1.5 million shares. Very nice. CFO sold 151,000 shares at around 1.5. 224,000. No longer directly owns any common stock of FUBO. Who knows? Might be on the way out. We'll see. And then we had this news also just a couple of days ago. FUBO and Comcast unit NBC Universal said Monday they're launching 6 NBCU fast channels in Canada with sports, entertainment, news, and Latino programs. FUBO Canada's sports, entertainment, and premium plans will now have NBC News Now, Noticias Telemundo Ahora, and Telemundo Al Día. The company said, adding that 3 more English language channels will be available in Canadian plans soon. Financials weren't provided, and FUBO shares up a little bit since then. And then we go back to November 1st. That is the day we did our last update, and we spoke about, of course, the Wedbush price target downgrade from 5 to 3, which is still 100% higher than where it is now, keeping their outperform rating. FuboTV confident in claims against Disney, Fox, Warner Brothers. Yeah, see, and technically we had a slight miss on the revenue, but again, yes, they did raise their outlook. If you recall, subscribers grow 9%. Let's look at the outlook again real quick. We got, 150 million in cash. FUBO expects fourth quarter revenue of 434 million to 455 million versus estimates of high 300 millions. 2024 revenue for the year 1613 billion to 1635 billion. Prior was 1603 to 1625. Everyone else was looking for about 162, which is still technically kind of mid-range for this new buffed up guidance. But again, you remember what I said a couple of quarters ago when they supposedly brought them down because they issued a little bit weaker guidance. What did I say? I said, give them a quarter or two. They're probably going to beat, and then all of a sudden you're going to hear they're going to readjust that guidance and they're going to pump it back up. And that is literally exactly what happened here, as we see. So that's why they can beat it up and they can try to keep it down. But this is why I'm saying, man, all of these people who are betting against FUBO, they better hope the judge rules against them. Because if this judge again rules in favor of FUBO, I mean, again, look, $4, over a year ago, and then back here at the end of 23, the stock was almost at $4. So it hit $4 a year ago before we started to get this news, which means if the news didn't come out, stock might be like here, right? at almost $5. So that's why, again, in my opinion, if it doesn't go their way, yeah, it's going to suck and Wall Street's probably going to drop them a little bit. But in general, I mean, they are growing, and in my eyes, it really should continue to climb. Market cap seems very low, in my opinion. We can easily double this value. Again, 150 million in cash. We can see debt's been pulling back now, sub 400 million. Short-term liabilities outweighing assets, opposite on the long term. Our equity has technically been dropping and dwindling away. That's why it's funny. In a lot of the fundamentals, you can say it actually looks like a weak stock. However, in the actual metrics that is kind of required of the business, everything else is growing. Again, the subscriber count, the revenue is up, the margins are improving, the losses are improving. Trading 2 times book. Enterprise value, again, what another business would be willing to pay for it. It's almost 200 million, about 40% higher than current valuation. Our return percentages are still negative, but getting better. Gross margin, look at this, minus 2%, up to 4, 3, 7, now we're up to 10, 11.5%. This is what I mean, a lot of these margins are improving. We had a drop down in the operating margin percentage back to minus 15%. However, even though it dropped back further negative, and it looks like a very bad thing, this minus 15.8% is technically better than all of these quarters before it. So that's why, again, they didn't, like they kind of dropped it initially. I can understand, but also at the same time, I personally don't see kind of like a real foundation to kind of just keep beating them up. I don't personally view it as too negative, even though, of course, technically numbers are negative, right? But you understand what I'm saying. EBITDA. Again, you can see we went in the wrong direction. We were climbing closer and closer to flatness, and then we doubled back down negative, minus 12.4%. But minus the last quarter, this is still better than all of these quarters before it. Which, again, is why I say something like FUBO, I feel like you kind of have to step back and try to look at, where it could be 1, 2, 3 years from now, and not necessarily how it might look a month from now, 3 months from now. But that's just me. I'm sure some people might, see the dropping equity, the dropping book value, and they might feel much more hesitant to step into something like this than I would. Obviously, technically in the numbers, this is not the most fundamentally sound stock that we've looked at. But again, before we got news of these litigation issues, stock was performing very well for us on this channel. This is the first miss in several quarters, but again, we're looking to jump up now back above the 400 million ranges over the next several quarters. Phenomenal. Going from slightly sub 1.4 billion in revenue for 23, going up to 1.618 over 2. So that's why technically the growth is still there, and we can see we're expecting to kind of continue to get a little more tight on these losses over the next couple of quarters. They're not expecting profitability to 2027. So that's why I'm saying, again, if we are able to really kick this into gear, and if this extra jump up of revenue now into the lower mid 400 million ranges, if that can help spill over and cover some of these losses, you might see like minus, 14 cents here, and they might have a nice beat. And here might be like minus 7 cents. And here might be like minus 1 cent, right? You understand what I'm saying? So if we start to see something like that, that's why even with the litigation looming, you may potentially have the premature breakout over that long-term symmetrical triangle that we spoke about on the improving EPS and revenue numbers. But some might say that's wishful thinking, perhaps. But, yeah. So yeah, have to see if it regains that initial support trend line that we looked at last time. We'll see if we pop back up and then maybe try to break up. So we'll see. Only time will tell. But again, usually from the time we started looking at it, I'd say 95% of the news that we read on FUBO has been very positive. Obviously the bad news was the joint venture, of course, them entering the space. and technically the slight $2 million miss that they had last earnings report. But again, stock seems to be trying to rebound off of the recent pullback to that fib level. MACD looks like it flattened out and now crossed back to the upside on this pop. We did technically hit that trend line and top Bollinger Band 160. So that's why we could potentially be flat, but also at the same time, if we pop up a few cents, as I initially said, to get back above the line, back inside the triangle, that would make sense as well, and that wouldn't really overextend it too much on the Bollinger Band side. RSI on the daily 55.25, so that's why we can definitely break up and out, continue this momentum. We can see it looks like just consolidation taking place here, basically since that August news, which is why I'm saying we might be ready for a little bit of a pop maybe inside of the next week or so, or drop, but you know, we know anything can happen, but I'm trying to be optimistic. RSI here on the weekly, middle of the road, 51.60. Again, you can see channeling downward, potentially setting up to pop. So that's why, in my eyes, again, the numbers, you could make the argument kind of mixed. In the technicals, we might have some indicators showing us that we can get back to around 2-ish maybe here in the short term. MACD relatively flat on the weekly side. Let's check the pivot points real quick. I'll let you go. Pivot points here, 147. Again, we had the drop into the 130s. We tried to hold that pivot point, 147. Technically, we're above it now. And the 50-day moving average, 169. Let's see, where would that... Yeah, see, technically, the top trend line of this triangle would immediately be like 171. So to get back to 169 and test that 50-day moving average here on the weekly, that is very feasible. And then that's what I mean. If we retest, because you can see we rejected since August when we initially popped to that moving average. So that's why we might kind of like have a flash up right to that moving average and then a slight rejection and then, you know, a possible break up and out. So we'll see. We'll see what it wants to do Monday, Tuesday. And if you guys want, we can come back. We can do an update. Next pivot point upward is 267 on the weekly. That would technically bring it up above the top line resistance, 260. That'd be here. Where was this gap? 241. Yeah, I mean, it's possible. Again, you know, you never know what is going to be reported also. You never know what news is going to come out. And you can see what I say. We have the fib at 164, right, regaining this this support trend line around 164, and we have a pivot point right here, 166. So that's what I mean. Kind of looks like it's all lining up to potentially climb up a little bit. And then, in my opinion, it'll probably, again, break up. I would say 70-30, in my opinion, that it should kind of break up as opposed to break down. But we know anything can happen. A lot of people didn't think we would break the support trend line. And then, again, we dropped down to 137 or whatever it was. So we know anything can happen. But, again, in my opinion, overall, I do like FUBO. And until I start to see that subscriber count is stagnated and, you know, revenue starts missing the mark and all of a sudden they're reporting wider than expected losses like they were several years ago before business got better, then and only then really would I personally hop the fence and, you know, start to say, maybe FUBO's not worth it. But in the moment right here, I personally still like it, but that's just me. But I'll end it there. Once again, Stocks by the Numbers. I want to thank you for stopping by. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please drop them down in the comments section. I'm usually very quick to reply. Thumbs up algorithm helps me get more eyes on the channel. And of course, subscribe to the channel. That is our handshake agreement. That is how you help me help you. But of course, more importantly, moving forward, like I always say, I understand that markets are rocky, they're volatile, and they are very uncertain. So I want to wish all of you success. I hope everyone makes a couple of dollars. Thank you for your time. Have a good day.